This story has all elements of passion, high art, philosophy, melancholy, drama, and death. I'm not done. 15 years of apprenticeship. A prodigy among the critics, like the highbrow elite haute couture perfumery. Very approachable person in real life, yet almost like taken out of 19th century and placed in, guess where, 21st century. Everything that I just said happened in the very short span of time in 21st century. But to understand Mona di Orio and to understand her creations, we need to wind back a little bit. And with that, we're gonna start digging deeper. The Mona di Orio brand, as I kind of started familiarizing myself with French niche, pops out rather naturally if you go through articles of, people who at least consider themselves connoisseurs. Mona di Orio as a brand is kind of a niche critique darling. I was intrigued. I was not opposed to trying something highbrow, trying something expensive, and yet I was too late to the game. At that point, all of the dramatic events have already happened, and I rather missed all of them, knew nothing about all of the drama about which we'll talk in a minute. I was just curious, what is the real deal? What's behind all that extravagant praise and somewhat of a mysterious chthonic deity type of allure that surrounded the brand? Yet, this is one of those cases we cannot jump straight to the point, just like with Serge Lutens and some other brands, until we unveil the kind of the core mystery and the character of the maker. Mona di Orio is presumably a Van Gogh of contemporary perfume world. She became even more so precious and even more so expensive, and even more mysterious is now who owns the rights to her perfume creations after her death. While she actually did enjoy quite some, at least kind of connoisseur recognition when she was alive. She was born in 1969, and she is a French woman. She was born and raised in Annecy, France, and as kind of the story goes, she was obsessed with perfumes and scents ever since she was a girl. But she had no into the perfume industry, so that kind of just remained her passionate hobby. When I was researching, trying to find anything about Mona di Orio, one of the things that stood out to me that she was saving money as a girl, little by little, coin by coin, to buy herself a real perfume. And you know what her first, as a young girl, you know what her first choice of a perfume was? L'Heure Bleue by Guerlain. That tells me, so it makes so much sense now in retrospective. When a young child gravitates toward L'Heure Bleue, you know they're special, you know they're not like everyone. And even then, like, you start feeling these kind of like cold, misty, and mossy underworld tones to the whole story. L'Heure Bleue, as a first fragrance to a young girl, is to me pretty much like season 2 of Wednesday. Anyway, Mona grew up. She got education in, I think, arts and literature. And when she was 17, she managed to meet, I don't remember if there was ever mentioned how exactly they met, but she met Edmund Rudnitska, a pretty much iconoclast perfumer, the person who kind of broke the mold and became known as a nose, like as a perfumer with his own name, because a lot of perfumers before him were nameless. It still remains to be kind of the status quo that majority of the perfumers who make amazing creations remain pretty much anonymous to the world, and only the master perfumers, essentially, professors of perfumery who have a whole lab and many apprentices and many people working for them, those we do know by name, and not even always necessarily. So Edmund Rudnitska was the man to learn from. They met, she made her plea, she said how passionate she was about learning perfumery, he advised her to get more education, and here kind of the story diverges. According to some sources, Mona went along and actually got a formal organic chemistry education as a perfumer. In her own words, in the very rare interview that I found, she said that she finished her arts degree and went straight to Edmund Rudnitska laboratory, and she remained his apprentice for 15 years. 15. In the model academy, tech world, art world, usually apprenticeships last between a year, the most common 3 years, in certain cases 5 years, but rarely more than that. At that point, something is up. Something is not quite usual. They remained very close, and in the way that she described how he trained her to be more than just a chemist or more just a person who evaluates fragrances or mixes them, but to be an artist, to be a philosopher. So instead of the usual program in how it's taught in majority of perfume schools, where you first get your chemistry degree, then you start kind of going through ingredients, you're going through regulations, and then you start reproducing classic perfumes. So you understand what makes a perfume, what makes a chypre, what makes a fougere, what makes a gourmand, what makes like an oceanic or fresh perfume, what makes a classic Italian cologne. She said that Edmund Rudnitska almost pushed her away from reproducing what was popular, what was classic, and forced her to read artistry books, philosophy books, books all about aesthetics, architecture, fashion, design of everything, including music, and to describe and try to reproduce smells from nature. She was saying that he was really adamant that she remains free of the market pressures, free of the status quo, and yet very prolific and true to what exists. And that does not necessarily mean that it has to be a flower, but it has to be something that existed in life, rather than like a commercial, brief for a perfume. Very interesting scenario. I feel that was more than just a kind of classic apprenticeship, like in any trade. It feels that they actually were close friends, and possibly I wasn't there, I don't know, but it's just like that level of curation, of detail, and almost somewhat of a tyrannic love that Edmund Rudnitska had for Mona, to me says that he saw her as his heir in a way, like as his artistic child. In 2004, Mona finally opened her own eponymous brand, Maison Mona di Orio. Not much has saved the test of social media and time for us to just easily learn about how she thought about it. There are a few interviews scattered here and there, but they are fairly short and fairly kind of high level. We know that Mona really loved golden ratio, that she constantly chased that perfection, and she chased that kind of contradiction or surprise that comes from combining notes. And I think that pretty much shows the influence of the teachings of Edmund Rudnitska, how he tried to train her, specifically her, to be a philosopher, to be an artist, to be a stylist of anything, and including sounds, visuals, smells, anything. So it was a very important part of her legacy and of her creations. When she created her first perfumes, you can even see that in the bottle design, which is probably the most visual, the most easy to dissect and to describe object that her legacy has preserved. Those looked kind of like square champagne bottles. There were a lot of elements there. It was certain, I dare say, Art Deco aesthetic about them. In talking of Art Deco, Mona herself, when you look at her when she was with us, and that was like 2007, 2009, 2010, it's 21st century. It was a video on social media, and yet I felt that we were listening to a woman from 19th century, or at the very, very latest 1920s. Her style of clothing, her whole kind of constitution, and the way that she talked and the way that she expressed herself, that was almost eerie and uncanny, that a woman who created her perfume brand in 21st century would behave, talk, look, sound, and operate as, a Renaissance artist. How did that meet with the commercial demands of the market and with the very strict regulations on ingredients? It's still a mystery to me, because the creations of Mona di Orio are very characteristic for their unapologetic obsession with ingredients and how the raw materials combine. In that sense, let's probably begin. Let's talk about the perfumes. This is the new design. Not a big fan. I really wish they kept the old design. I presume that was too expensive to produce. That's why they changed it. But the new one, even though it's very heavy and very substantial, I'm just not a big fan. This is kind of, to me, somewhat awkward. Also, the names of the perfumes are, you can't see them. I can't see them either. They are so small and font. This takes such a tiny space, and the paint pigment that's used to put them on the bottle is very unstable. So mine nearly all worn off, and I only recognize them by scent itself. That said, this is what they look like, and I have an example for you for all the travel sizes, which I think are probably the best way to experience Mona di Orio, if you can find them. So already I'm using one, and this I have two more. The most reviewed fragrance by Mona di Orio is probably Vanille. It's a very boozy, resinous, spicy vanilla scent. It is, in a way, dark and melancholic, and that is the quality that it just keeps popping at me throughout all of my experiences and digging that I had with Mona di Orio. Everything about it, it's almost like somebody resurrected a heroine from a Jane Austen novel and brought her to 21st century, or even more so, probably one of the Bronte sisters. There's such a chthonic, melancholic, very contemplative base to all of these perfumes. They are fairly different, and yet there is something that combines them all with one thread. And I do find that her base is recognizable. This is definitely what every perfume house dreams about, that they have both a recognizable DNA to all their scents, and yet the scents are sufficiently different that the audience enjoys every new release. Definitely true about the core the core perfumes from Mona di Orio line. When the bottles got repackaged, there was a rumor that they reformulated and cheapened the scent. The Mona di Orio brand vehemently denies it, and they say that this is the last thing they would ever do, because this is nearly all what Mona di Orio really cared about: the quality of the raw ingredients, consistency, and the perfection of the formula. I do have all my fragrances here in the new bottles, and I find absolutely no flaw with them whatsoever. I don't have the vanille. I didn't get a chance to put my hands on it. Maybe in the future if I'm lucky. But let me tell you about the ones that I have. All of my scents are coincidentally from the same collection, Le Nombre d'Or. I'll leave the names down below and the links if anything is still available for sample. The first one, and that was actually the first one I bought, was Le Nombre d'Or Rose. I think these are roses of Holland. Let me double check. What's the full name? Rose Étoile de Hollande. Holland. Roses from Holland, as far as I understand. Well, that was an introduction. I am not the biggest rose fan. I love a good jasmine or a good rose-centric perfume as much as any other person does, but it is a challenge to really enjoy rose-centric fragrances because there's just so many of them, and that's such a kind of like done, overdone, jingle bells kind of tone, kind of note. Yet rose, the Holland rose, managed to kind of surprise me. This is what I expected and dreamt about when I bought Veloute Roses from L'Artisan Parfumeur, the stealer, a hunter for roses, something like that. It's very mossy, it's green, there's this very dense, almost concentrated patchouli with some kind of mossiness and greenness here with the rose oil. It's sour, but it's not a typical rose oil type of sourness. It's just so chthonic. This is the adjective for the brand. It's very melancholic. It's kind of, it's like the end of November if you're somewhere in the Scotland's forest. The only life that's surviving is moss, frozen rocks. It's not as much icy as it is just very melancholic and very kind of this wet, mossy, dense fluid. It reminds me oddly of both Mitsuko, and it's like if you could mix Mitsuko Eau de Parfum, like a vintage version, with Frederic Malle Rose Cuir. It's like if Rose Cuir by Frederic Malle was going through a rather dramatic and bitter divorce in her late 50s. That would be the Holland's Rose by Mona di Orio. It's alluring in the way that you just want to quit. That's how I feel. I just want to quit. I just want to stop everything I'm doing, sell everything, cover myself with a warm throw, get a finally like thick book that I never had time to read, and just, go to the woods, build a cabin and just say, that's it. I'll just stay here until I can't survive anymore, and then I'll die. I don't know, to me, this is just something very picturesque, yet not that inviting to wear on a daily basis. This and all of the Mona di Orio scents open up even more beautifully in the rainy weather, in that slushy, disgusting weather when it's neither snowy, no, it's warm, it's not sunny, it's not nothing, it's just this gray mess that is very characteristic of February and November. They just become so colorful and they become so potent, is so omnipresent in a way in that kind of weather. So if you are somewhere up north and the weather is bleak, I find that sometimes there's the most therapeutic effect of, instead of going to the opposite, which helps sometimes, wearing some cheerful, fresh, invigorating citrus or heartwarming spices with gourmands, but actually kind of diving straight in to the melancholy in the bareness and almost adding more concentrated melancholy there. The Roses of Holland, to me, is the door that you go overly dramatic. It's like, you know what? Yes, life sucks. And you feel better just by kind of leaning into this nothingness and unbearable sadness. You feel better. By the way, I only have three splittable decants for the roses. So if you want to get on it, you better DM me now. As soon as you see it. Next one is Vetyver. I thought about being just curious how Mona would do Vetyver after the roses, because Vetyver to me is yet another note that's so done, overdone in primarily men's perfumery. And I'm using it intentionally in quotes because there are no masculine feminine scents, just like there is no masculine or feminine potatoes, okay? Food is food, scents are scents. You like it or you don't like it. Vetyver tends to be green, dry, milky, but it's rarely gourmand, and it's rarely, at least in my experience, it's rarely dense and vibrant and juicy. Smoky, woody, spicy, yes. Dense, juicy, like almost gourmand, delicious, rarely ever. And I was secretly hoping maybe Mona, with her rich tapestry that she puts into the heart and the base of her perfumes, maybe she will bring something out of Vetyver that I've never heard before. And she does. It's definitely one of the more deeper, richer, velvety type of Vetyver scents. Still, it's not quite as gourmand as I wish it could be. But that probably wouldn't be Mona. It would be too festive for Mona di Orio. But it's sweeter, and again, to me, it opens up this kind of slightly oily and nutty facets of Vetyver. I tend to wear it the most out of everything that I have from this brand. This is not my most worn Vetyver. If you want to know which ones are those, the video is already on the channel. Just search it. But it's definitely one that brings me a lot of comfort. All of Mona di Orio to me is fall, winter, and early spring scents. I rarely find a place for them, especially in the humid Florida summer heat. It just doesn't work for me in the humid and hot weather. But again, if you live more up north, so probably summer nights, can afford to wear something like that. I find that this, again, among those that I've tried, is the charmer. I don't know why, but this is because it has this like little bit of a chestnut note to me. It just makes it so cuddly, and yet it is chthonic, it is melancholic, it is contemplative. It's very philosophical type of Vetyver. Next one is gonna be ambre. I am usually skeptical about getting new ambers. I have so many excellent, amazing, just astonishingly vibrant, deep, resinous, smoky, caramelly, all kinds of ambers. Anything you can imagine, I have it already. But it's Mona. You see, at that point, I was in. Like Mona synced her Art Deco teeth into me. Her vampire ghost got into my blood. I was like, I gotta see though. What is she gonna do with the Christmas scent, the winter scent of them all, amber? Because it's so festive, it's so sensual, rich, good. How can you make amber otherworldly? How can you make amber live in the underworld? Well, she surely did. Compared to many other ambers that I have, and some really excellent deep ones, I would say is L'Ambre Extreme. Extreme by L'Artisan Parfumeur. Amber 114 or 11.4 by Histoire de Parfums. I mean, obviously Grand Soir by Francis Crook-Jung, but to me, I like it less than the previous two. So those two are even sweeter. Amber Sultan by Serge Lutens is much sweeter. This is just sweet enough. It's just sweet enough that when you take a spoonful of that amber honey, you fail to notice the cyanide, hidden underneath. It's just, again, it's something in the base that has this kind of creaking old wood door that is just about to give up and fall. Beautiful. It's just, it's beautiful. And yet, I find if you really actually don't like amber, it's rare, but it happens, this could be the one. I happen to be very comfortable with amber, and when I'm sitting there and thinking, some like really good deep amber would be nice about right now, I would go for something a little bit more festive. This is still, it's like a honey mixed with moss. Amber honey mixed with moss. It's beautiful. I need to wear it more often. Like every time I smell, it's like, why don't I wear it more often? It's mostly by the comparison that I gravitate towards something a little bit more resinous or spicy or boozy. This is very beautiful though. And the last one that I chose to have in my collection is Musk. I was just very intrigued by boiled sweet musks at the time. Not the ones that you find in detergents, so-called white musks. Not the ones that became popular via their kind of refreshing sourness. Think of Tiziana Terenzi and like many, many, many others after that. But the sweet, it's almost like these pound cake with like thick vanilla cream. This sweet, boiled, very sensual, closer to skin-sitting musks. Those that Kilian knows how to make, Tom Ford knows how to make. Frederic Malle Musc Ravageur is a stellar, almost like one of the most well-known examples of what I call boiled sweet musk. And I call it boiled, it's just because like when you boil something longer and longer, it's almost, it gives everything. And like, it's like those exploding sausages. At that point, there's like nothing left hidden. It's like it just continuous boiling just gets absolutely everything out of it, whatever the note is. So the boiled musk to me is just like, it's so like slow cooked to perfection. It's just like every single nuance in the juice that it could give, it's given. And there's a sweet, very sensual, very animalic musk. I like this way more than I do Musc Ravageur by Frederic Malle. Oh, Narcisse Rodriguez, the classic one, the pink bottle, Eau de Parfum, also boiled musk. It is probably one of those that is a little smothering, so I would be careful. And yet, I'm going to say a sacrilegious thing. If you are about to go clubbing, and it's a goth type of clubbing, like it's more BDSM-y or a little bit more edgy and more alternative. This is sexy and edgy. It's sexy and yet kind of, it has a little bit of teeth. It has a little bit of this, I wouldn't say mean, but again, contemplative, detached, vampire-like demeanor. But this Sweet Musk is just stellar choice for anyone who likes these kind of sensual, animalic, sweet, musky perfumes that are not gourmand, not fully gourmand, not fully edible. Now we go to even a tragic end. In 2011, after issuing this very collection, Mona, according to the story, went to a minor kind of rudimentary medical procedure. I don't remember if it was ever mentioned what the procedure was for. And the only information that I could find is that there were some complications that has risen during the procedure. And shortly after it was over, Mona died. And here the story diverges again. In one statement, it was said that Mona never made it back from the operating table. Another story says that no, the procedure finished, but then the complications that happened during the procedure took her life eventually. They couldn't really stabilize and save her. It was so sudden, clearly unplanned, and in a way so surreal how pointless and sudden that departure was, that people to this day are not sure if that's the true story. I think that's just the nature of real tragedies. They're too pointless in a way. They're almost random to be believed in as they are. After that, the Mona di Orio house continued to exist, and it seemed to me that they wanted to kind of take Mona's legacy, which was the niche of the niche, right? Like Comme des Garçons is like the niche in the designer perfume market. Mona di Orio is like the niche in the niche perfume market. So unapologetically vintage and classical and philosophically artistic, and this Art Deco approach and Renaissance approach to making perfumes. I felt that they really wanted to kind of even condense and solidify on that concept. So they released a few other collections and a few other fragrances in the regular lines, and like a whole separate other collection, which was so prohibitively expensive that even with the support of the professional and like highbrow, the elite perfume community, that was not really a viable business scheme. And eventually the collection was taken back to be reformulated to be a little bit more accessible for the lovers of the perfume. And now, as of today, as I checked online, Mona di Orio website stopped selling the perfumes altogether. It's not clear if they even exist as a brand. Are they trying to sell themselves to one of the corporations such as Estee Lauder or Shiseido, or there are a few others? Are they closing the doors? So pretty much nobody really knows what's going to happen with the brand. There are still a lot of niche boutiques that have stock of Mona di Orio, but you really have to hunt it down. And it's really sad because I feel that it's one of those brands that, just like Serge Lutens, it had so much character. It was so out of place, and yet all the people who felt out of place found home in it. All the weirdos in 21st century who were nostalgic for the better, pure, more romantic times that losing Mona di Orio feels like a big loss, like a part of history ceased to exist in the modern times and is never to come back. Who knows, maybe they will. They definitely do have a challenge of how can you stay Art Nouveau, Art Deco, Renaissance if you are to function in the contemporary fragrance industry. That's not an easy challenge to solve. I wish them luck. I hope they'll figure it out. I do think that probably corporate backing, or at least a very golden private investor, is needed for haute perfumery like this. But there's also something to be said about keeping in mind that Mona di Orio was a namesake, right? Like an eponymous brand. And maybe not every brand is Chanel-like or Dior-like when the legacy continues and almost has its own life after the creator is gone. It seems that some very delicate balance that Mona herself managed to maintain, being of this world but not quite, being very philosophical and artistic in the way she operated, and yet, going to all of the accents and all the other conferences, working with the packaging, figuring out what sells, being very accessible in person and not snobbish at all. Like, there was nothing about her that was even remotely highbrow. So that balance, somehow, once she was gone, it seems that balance also went out the window. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's possible to resurrect a brand, or is Mona's legacy meant to be as of one goal? Who knows? I am curious to hear what you have to say. Have you tried any fragrances like that? As I said, I'm more than happy to split the bottles, but I only have 50 mils, and I also want to keep some for myself, so this probably is gonna be as limited edition as it gets to my online olfactory shelves. Probably no more than 3. But I'll leave a link below, so those of you who do wanna touch the history and indulge in the Chthonic deity that Mona di Orio was, you're welcome. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave your requests for new videos below and let me know how I can help. Like, is there any part of your journey that you're still struggling with? Anything I can do, I'll try to get you a solution. All right? I'll see you in the next video.